Recording has started, and I'm super excited. Friday evening, 5:55 p.m. What do two passionate professionals do? Chat, right? Get on to yet another video call and say, let's chat. Hi Doug, thank you so much for accepting my request, and let's get started.
Okay, it's my pleasure, Ajay.
Thank you. Who's Doug? When we ask your friends, what will they say? Who's
Oh
Doug?
boy. I've got quite a story, Ajay. So, oh boy. Okay, well, I'll start where I was born.
Okay.
So, born and raised in Rochester, New York. So, upstate New York. It was about 40 miles due south of Toronto, right across the lake, in kilometers of 60 kilometers. Right. So snow country, we used to get back then, of course, now, it's different. It's different now. Quite a bit different. But when I was growing up, we would easily get 2 meters of snow drifts.
Okay. Hmm.
However, the schools were so hardcore that the only time they closed was when the entire school was covered with snow.
Hard, real hard.
Otherwise, no. Even if like the drifts were up to here, remember I was, kid, 8, 9, 10 years old, right? Drifts are up here. No, still have to go to school.
Got it.
They were really hardcore. Um, so then I went to college in the State University of Potsdam, which is even further north, close to Montreal, Canada.
Got it.
Um, and it was notable in that. Actually, I should talk about my high school for a second. So my high school was one of the few that actually bought a computer, and this was in 1971. So I wrote my first application in 1971 on a PDP-8, DEC PDP-8.
Okay. I'm hearing it for the first time, but then yeah, that's
It was about the size of a small refrigerator on its side,
okay.
literally, and it had 4K of RAM,
Hmm.
which was considered a huge amount at the time.
Right.
There was no video. There was no. The only way you could input your program code, you couldn't store the program code,
Hmm. Hmm.
or just very temporarily in RAM. So we had they weren't even punch cards; they were mark cards.
Okay.
So we marked them with an IBM number 2 pencil,
Hmm.
and we had this stack of cards. So we had a card reader. It read the cards in. Each card represented one line of code. It was in BASIC, Dartmouth BASIC.
Long, long, long ago.
Yes. And then the output came in the form of a teletype machine.
Hmm. Hmm.
So all of our math assignments had to be done on a computer. So it was actually the math department that managed the computer. And then later, the year before I graduated, they got a Fortran compiler. Oh, we were like so psyched.
Right. So which year is this?
This was it. I graduated in 1975.
Hmm. 10
Yeah.
years before I was born.
So
Great.
then, when I went to college, the thing about my college was it was the third best computer school west or east of the Mississippi River.
Hmm. Hmm.
So the only better ones were MIT and Carnegie Mellon. Carnegie Mellon.
Right.
Those were the top schools. So the reason why this is just a state university. The reason why it was so good was because it was subsidized by IBM. So every year, IBM sent up a recruiting team, and they hired almost the entire graduating class of the computer science
Very
uh,
nice.
curriculum.
Good investment.
Yeah. So they had like these job fairs, and IBM was like half of it, literally, because their headquarters was in White Plains, New York, which was just down the Hudson River. literally like a 4 or 5 hour drive from the campus.
Got
So it
it.
was like almost, it was an IBM shop. They had two mainframes, IBM mainframes, and that's where I did my hardcore computer science 101. Formally trained in computer science. However, I wasn't a computer science major. I was a history and French major,
Very nice.
and I started out in philosophy.
No wonder. That is, I believe that all that is helping you, especially at least the philosophy.
Yeah. We were, it was really wild stuff. And my junior year, third year, I spent the year in France. When we studied French culture, literature, French language, total immersion. And I was really fascinated with the existentialist philosophy.
Got it.
Really very profound stuff. And we got to see the cafe where Jean-Paul Sartre used to write his writings, and Camus, Albert Camus, and all of the famous writers. Yeah, it really changed my life, I'll tell you. Yeah.
Cool. From French philosophy, history, and then to IBM mainframes. Right.
So can you imagine this history and French major walking into his French class with a stack of program cards, punch cards under my arm? They're like,
Who are you?
what's wrong with you?
Yeah.
Why are you messing around with those things? I almost failed German. German language escaped me. French language was no problem, but German, I don't know why. It just didn't.
I tried German. For I had to visit the office in German for like 5 days or 10 days, because I was going to participate in a conference near the office location. So I said, okay, let me try German. And then the instructor took the fees. First day gave me a PDF, gave me audio sounds, and then they said, this line, this paragraph is in this audio file, and I will tell you what it is. Play the audio file, and then she would repeat and ask me to repeat. And I went there for a week, and I said, if that is all you are going to do, rather I take the PDF, I take the audio.
Yeah.
Right? So she would be there in the class for 10. I was the only student. She would be there in the room for 10 minutes, and then she would say, now practice on yourself. Practice by yourself. I was like, okay, why am I traveling to this place? Anyways, I have paid. I did not regret that I paid 8K or Indian rupees, but then I said, I did not want to pay 12 or 18K to the Max Mueller who teach German. I said, no, I'll save 4K. So I call it like the experience costed 8K, and then from then on I said, any training, learn from the experts. It is, you will not regret paying that cost, whatever they ask for. Yeah. That was my French, German, good. So what happened after mainframes? I mean, any special event that you feel like, oh, this kind of really changed my life again?
I say that the programming classes were pretty routine, but I mean, it's good, solid information. I still use that to this day when I do my PHP. I still do PHP development. So all of those principles are really, very, very good, solid foundation. But I'll tell you what really changed my life in the university, aside from my girlfriend, who's we separated a long time ago. We were supposed to get married. I'll tell you about my rock and roll days in a bit.
So you had this whole.
We didn't get married.
Did you have like this?
I had my hair long, yeah.
Yeah, and then a guitar or something.
I was playing bass guitar and then later keyboards.
I do have some friends in the community who then show up their old photos, and I'm like, oh my God, you are that person. Right?
Yes, exactly. And so I was into music, like really into music. And I took a class called synthesizer techniques.
Okay.
And I'll tell you that, and that was at the time when they were first starting to, like Pink Floyd, Dark Side of the Moon, around that time period. So they actually had, it was called a Putney VCS3. It was the same synthesizer that Pink Floyd used on Dark Side of the Moon. It wasn't the same one, of course, obviously, but it was the same model. So they had one of those. They had a Mini Moog. They had an Art Odyssey, and those are like the classic synthesizers at the time, the new wave of synthesizers. And so I had a class on synthesizer techniques, and it's like I learned all about how to create sound waves. Oh, and then I took a course in the acoustics, the physics behind sound. So I learned about waveforms and oscillators and all of this stuff. And I'll tell you, then that really, I've been playing bass guitar, and I decided to switch back to keyboards because I'd had classical piano training. So I thought, well, I was starting to talk with some friends back home. We were thinking of forming a rock band. In fact, we had formed a rock band. We were a hard rock punk band. We played just before I came to university. So
Right.
we played for about a year around town. Right. In fact, I'll digress for a minute. We had this concert at it was a campground, and you can imagine like a family campground. I think they had no idea who they were signing up, and all of a sudden in rolls like this van and a car and a car and a car, Marshall stacks. I had an orange amplifier, and so like they had all this equipment, right? And I was playing bass at the time. We had a guitarist, we had a drummer, and we had all of this equipment. And we just like, after the first song, the building emptied.
Right.
It was hardcore punk rock.
Right.
I
And
mean, one guy stayed. He stayed the whole time, right in the front. He's like, yeah.
yeah, sometimes the audience, it's like solve the problem. Sometimes it's not for that audience. I keep saying.
Yeah. It wasn't for, this is like a campground, family campground, moms and pops,
Like,
kids.
so
Nah.
and then you're like,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they wanted right, and we weren't giving it. So anyway, then we stayed up late celebrating. Of course, the campground wasn't celebrating, but we were celebrating. And then the very next day, I had to go to my orientation at university the next day.
you woke up.
And so I'd been up till like 2 or 3 in the morning, got home, shaved and showered, jumped on a bus, went up to my orientation, and I was like this, the whole orientation like this. What a way to make an impression, right?
I'm surprised you went there. Like you still had the energy to go there.
Well, hey, 18 years old.
Unlimited energy.
Yeah, that's right. You remember when you were 18, right? You're like, yeah.
2
Nothing.
days, 3 days night out, no problem. And then sleep for like
That's
1.5 days. Yeah.
Oh, that's right.
God.
Okay, so anyway, let me go back. Okay, so after, so synthesizer techniques. And then I found this company that actually made a computer that you could build from a kit, and it could be connected to a keyboard. So computers and synthesizers, and I'm like, whoa. So all of a sudden my two worlds came together.
Right. You all that you did, and then here is your opportunity. You did
Yeah.
for fun, and here they are ready to pay you for that. Huh?
Exactly. So they kind of came together, and I'm like, wow. So I over one of the school breaks, I jumped on a bus and took a bus down from my university down to Oklahoma City. It's like, this is like middle America, right? And it was like a 1,500 mile trip.
Right.
8 kilometers, about 2,000 something, 2,400 maybe. Yeah, and one way
Oh.
on a bus. And I was like a poor starving student. So I didn't have any money other than the money to buy this keyboard and computer. Right. So I had like some apples, and I had some granola bars, and that's what I survived on for like 3 days.
Yeah,
That's how
I
long
think at 18, 20 years, your body will say it's okay.
Yeah.
Good.
So I came back with this computer and synthesizer, which I built from a kit. I didn't know anything about soldering or electronics or I don't know anything about it. Right? So I'm kind of like, I guess, but they give you good instructions, right? So I was like soldering. And of course I completely messed it up. But fortunately, one of my roommates or housemates was a electronics engineer major. And so he took my computer and fixed it. So I had this little computer that was hooked up to the keyboard, but it had 2K of RAM, which I expanded to 4K later. But the only way you could get, later there was a tape interface, but in the beginning, the only way you can get a program in was to type in the machine code directly on a hexadecimal keypad. So I had to learn assembler language, and then I had to compile the assembler to machine code. So I had to like figure out all the machine code and then type it in and make sure it was correct. Which of course, 8 times out of 10 it wasn't correct. But when I did get it in, it's like, wow, this is great. And then later they had a tape interface so it could store your programs. So I created a sequencer program in assembler. And it could store up to 1,000 keystrokes. So I could type in like, hit my keyboard, boop, 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 right, and then play it back. And at the time, this is like when I graduated, it was 79, 80. So the rock band that we later formed, we had a computerized synthesizer. We had a laser light show. This is 1980. Right. And we played movies in the background when we performed.
Very nice.
So we played all around the city. And we were going for about 3 years. We had some radio play.
Brilliant. So, lot of experiences, different experiences, I would say. Like, from where to where? From history, French, escaping German to,
and then
taking
then
that
back
course.
to Rochester. Back to Rochester, and then a rock band, and then that's when I ended up breaking up with my fiance. There's something called groupies, which you may have heard of. Groupies.
Nice.
Yeah, so the rock band attracted attention, and I couldn't resist the attention. So I'm like, yeah.
All things, whatever happens for good.
Yeah, at 22, 23, 24 years old. And
ink blood. Nice. So at that time, did you even know that whatever you're doing right now, were you sorted out at that time, or like, let's do what I get and then we'll see what to do?
Starting 1970 was always computers and music.
Okay.
Always. I never, it was those two things, always. And still to this day, although the music has taken a sideline. Because music never paid the bills.
It paid the bills for the soul.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. So I got into programming BASIC at the time. Micros had BASIC and ROM. So my microcomputer stuff. I was doing some contract programming. 1980, 81. I had it was called a color computer from Radio Shack, and they had a 6809 Motorola processor, which is it was an 8-bit bus, but it had a 16-bit logical architecture. So you could actually write 16-bit code, which was like light years ahead of anything at the time.
And are you in touch with someone from that time where you both worked on the same thing and you're still in touch with that person?
Oh yeah. My band members actually, when I left, I left the band eventually after about 3 years. In 1984, I moved to San Francisco. But the band kept going, and those guys were together up until literally 3 years ago, when two of the band members died a couple years old. Not COVID, something else, other medical conditions. But they stayed together that whole time. So all the way from 1980 all the way up to 3 years ago, those guys played like practiced 3 times a week, and they played out probably about it was always original music. So they had a regular like 3 or 4 concerts every year. And it's like whenever I went back to visit, I'd bring my keyboard and I jam with the band, and just felt so good. And those guys are really dedicated. And I keep in touch. The ones that are still there, I keep in touch with them.
Nice. And the ones who you work with, the readers, you're typing out, the programming friends, how are they?
Well, see, I've always been a contractor.
Acha.
Yeah, I've always been a contractor. So some of my the colleagues that I work with tend to kind of, it's like a flow, Ajay. Almost like a flow. It's like you meet new people, you work on projects, then you start with another project, meet more new people. But sometimes I keep in contact with the others. Like this one guy, I worked on a project in 2010. It was like a 2-year project. And then I stayed in touch with him for years. And then there's another guy, he's from Italy. He was on the same project, so I'm still in touch with him as well.
Very nice. I mean, my the thing that I wanted to touch upon more based on this answer was on the lines of, are both of you, or the same batch, do you share the same emotions, or like how technology has changed, evolved, or it is like, have you all grown together with this change, or some way dropped off in between, or like taken different paths?
Yeah, I'd say that we've the ones that I'm in touch with the most have. I'll give you an example. One of my very, very close friends from my hometown, he and I are very similar. He went to another state university on the other side of the state, New York State. He was actually an art major, and then he eventually he worked in an art studio. And it was interesting. They were one of the first art studios that was computerized. And I actually worked on a program for them. So I was actually in the art studio with them for a while, contracting.
So you took the music route, he took the art route.
Yes. Well, they were also associated with the band. See, they did the graphics, and the one guy did the sound as well. And some background vocals as well. So there's kind of like this whole circle,
right. Feed onto each other, and then nice, very nice.
So the of the band members, four of us in the band, three were in the graphics industry, and they all worked at the same company, and they had it was an SG Silicon Graphics workstation. And they used that to produce the render the art, and they had like a markup language predecessor to HTML, before HTML. It's called SGML.
What XHTML did you say?
Yeah, Silicon Graphics Markup Language.
Okay, the letter S.
Okay. SGML, and actually that was derived from some work that IBM did. So then it eventually evolved into HTML. So that's what they were doing. They were actually doing, if you ever look at an HTML page, that's what those guys were doing like back in the 80s. Because the monitors just weren't powerful enough to produce the final rendered result. So they had like this markup language. They had to kind of like, it's probably going to look like this, right?
So
then like this whole rendering process. But there's no output on a monitor, it's printed output. They have these massive printers, right? And then you take this markup, render it, and then they get the final. So it would take like an hour to see what the final product looked like.
And then we now complain of, how much iteration we need to do.
The color's off, the font's wrong. It's like, right? Then another hour, right, to do the whole rendering and printing process. Yeah. So those guys were involved in that, you see, and I was doing my contracting stuff, and then they later two of them branched off and they formed their own business, setting up Mac networks for people. But see, the company eventually migrated away from Silicon Graphics over to Macs, because that's kind of like the artistic computer, really.
Right. Nice. You mentioned about BASIC. You mentioned about Fortran, HTML. You seem to have grown with the languages, or how the languages have evolved, right?
They like I said, it's like a flow. It's just like a flow.
So how many languages have you touched upon? How many languages have you worked with, or?
Oh man. Okay. Well, when I got to San Francisco, so this is 1984, I was doing a lot of, in the beginning, I was actually hired as a word processor for Pacific Bell, which was AT&T had just gotten broken up. And they had all these they call them baby bells. So I was working for Pacific Bell as a word processor. And then they found out I could write program code.
Right.
And then that was it.
Super happy. No more hire, no spend the money on Doug.
Yeah, so they had me doing, at the time it was called DBase, just an early database language. And it had its own language. You had like a database capability and language. So there's no SQL at that time.
Right.
It's actually like commands, and the commands created your program. So I was doing that. And then that kind of branched off into a whole sideline. So I was doing DBase for years in San Francisco for a couple different firms. And then later, I did some projects in Pascal. Pascal, which is kind of didn't really replace BASIC, because BASIC, but Pascal was considered to be a little bit more flexible and powerful.
So say we can count 3 so far.
Yeah, and then I worked for a company that did data conversions, converting anything to anything.
Okay.
And so most of my stuff was C.
This is somewhere like 80s? You're talking about 80s?
Yeah. This is like 85, 86, 87. So C language mainly. So we take like any format and convert it to some other format. So like Word to, what was the other one?
PDF.
Company in Utah. It was used by legal firms. Not Word, but it was, and it was later bought by Novell, but before that it was its own company. And that, I can't even remember the name now. It was like the predominant word processor for legal firms. So they usually wanted to go from that format to something else. Or something else to that format. So I wrote all these little C programs, and they did the converted the data. And then later, there's a language called Object Vision, which Borland produced.
Okay.
And it was a kind of an early effort at, I'm not going to say object-oriented programming, but they're trying to marry programming languages with a spreadsheet.
Programming languages with spreadsheets, okay.
So it had a kind of its own language, and you could write applications, and there's no database, but the database was a spreadsheet. So it's kind of a real interesting thing, but it was dog slow. So I wrote this application for this company, and it's like, oh man, it was so slow. They finally dropped the project. They said this is unworkable. Yeah. So they said that was one. Pascal. Oh, I wrote another one in a language called Forth.
Forth.
Yeah, Forth.
Okay.
It's a threaded interpretive language. So when you develop your program, you're actually creating the verbs, the commands. in the language, you're creating them. And it was stack-based. So when you stored things, you pushed them onto the stack, and then later you could pull them off the stack. And it was super fast, and it had like this small footprint. So you could run it on a microcomputer at the time. Even with just like 4K of RAM, you could still run. It was called Forth. It's one of my favorite languages. It's so quirky.
Yeah,
It's the closest one to assembler, other than, well, C language is not really close to assembler, but Forth is actually closer to assembler.
Yeah, something to check out. For I'm like something about, hey, what were you doing when you were at your peak? Hey, Forth, come on, tell me the answer. There must be something in the Wikipedia or articles.
Probably PHP. I'd have to say PHP, because I did stuff in Perl.
Oh no! I'm like that question was to like the fourth language. Imagine I asking that question to the fourth language. Who are you? Why are people talking about you? And then the fourth language will say, yeah, I'm so and so.
Oh, yeah. It's just I just love these like quirky languages, but again, really fast, super fast, with sort of being compiled. Yeah.
Nice. So C, then
C.
you did mention PHP.
Pascal, object vision, assembler language, 2 different kinds of assembler language. Okay, so that's 5 so far. C. And then there was Pascal,
SHTML.
SQL, DBase, and then there was, of course, earlier university days, PL1, Fortran, and Basic, of course. And then after that, then Perl, PHP, and Python. Done a couple of Python projects as well.
So you must have crossed JavaScript as well?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, of course, Java. I actually worked for a company that was at one point managed by a person by the name of Eric Schmidt. And he said Java. So everyone had to learn Java.
When people are reading about him, you are saying we followed what he said?
Yeah.
Nice.
I even shook his hand one time in Nice, in the airport in Nice.
Fantastic. Good.
Yeah.
So with so many languages and so much of wisdom, experience, I'm tempted to ask this question.
Yeah.
What are those 3 things that you want to suggest to this generation of professionals?
Oh boy. Hang on to your bootstraps, and it's going to be a very interesting ride. Things are just changing so fast. Yeah. So they talk about like 1st generation, 2nd generation, 3rd generation languages and that sort of thing. So you can think of like machine code. Okay, and then you got assembler. Okay, and then on top of that, then you have like C language. So they all compile down to machine code. And then you've got things that are written in C, like PHP is written in C language. So in a certain sense, that's like a 4th generation language. But now what you've got is these frameworks. So you've got Java, you've got your J2EE, and you've got your Java Beans. And for PHP, you've got like the various frameworks. So there's like Zen framework, which is now Laminus. There's Laravel. There's CodeIgniter. There's Cake PHP, Symfony, right? So you got all these frameworks. Same thing for Python, right? Python's got these modules, all these different modules. Like for example, okay, Python, you've got, and I did a project in this last year, Django. Or the Django, right? So you build a website, but you don't really build it in Python. You build it in Django, you see. And Django uses is a framework for Python for building websites.
Right.
So what's going now is it's just things are just being piled on top of each other. So it's almost like if I teach somebody PHP, it's not really going to do them much good, because when they get to the job, they're going to be using some framework. So it's like you still should know the core, but that's actually becoming less and less important. And it's disturbing in one respect, because it's like building bad code on top of bad code.
Right.
I would like to just get right back down to assembler and like scrap the whole thing, just do it in assembler, but that's not feasible anymore. The logical purity of assembler cannot be matched. Even C code takes, what's the word for it? They take shortcuts. They kind of do things a certain way. Whereas if you write it in assembler, you could outstrip C language easily. You could run it 100 times faster if you wrote it in assembler. But
skill, demand, supply.
Yeah, assembler is so detailed that it took me 3 years to write an assembler program in C language. I could write it in maybe a month. In PHP, 2 days.
Right.
So that's where I think I see things going. And now, of course, there's the AI tools. So it's getting to the point where you can just say, I want this, this, and this, and some AI-powered system will build the code for you, and it works. So we're talking now development time 5 minutes.
So there is this, of course, you must be aware of the Copilot. Have you used it?
Yes. Yeah. I haven't used it.
Okay.
I haven't used it, and I probably never will use it.
I am not of this type. I've directly played with the assembler code. It's okay, right?
Because I know all the garbage, that it's going to be creating, and it's like I can't stand inefficiency. So like that's why I wrote my own framework in PHP, because like there's all these different WordPress, Drupal, all that stuff. I just want a real simple website, something that's going to be fairly flexible. So I wrote my own framework.
So any open source that you want to share, share your screen, talk about anything of that sort?
Yeah. Do we have time?
Yeah. I will just delete the countdown timer so that we have enough time.
Oh, okay.
I'm just deleting it so that it doesn't say, hey, you have only 5 minutes left. Now we have all the time left. Go on.
Okay. I'll show you what I'm working on now then. Let's see, so.
This like one way to get rid of time pressure is, don't think about it. Be in the flow.
Okay, let's see if this works.
Yeah. Yes, you're sharing Firefox.
You can see Firefox. Okay, great. So, actually, that's not what I wanted to share. So I'm going to have to do it this way. Okay.
No
I wanted to just share the whole screen, but I don't know if it's going to let me do that. Your entire screen. Or a window, your entire screen. Window or screen. Oh, there it is. Okay, I see. I've got it. Okay, that's what I was looking for. Excellent. Okay, so now you can see probably the same thing, right?
Yeah, but also the background application. So
okay, now you're seeing a prompt, right?
Correct.
Okay. So what I do is I clone my repository for this little mini framework. And I can give you the link if you're interested. And then I go into this. Okay.
I am remembering my school days where DOS. Yeah, I can see the MS-DOS. I'm remembering the MS-DOS CD change directory.
Okay, and then you can see it says admin sh demo.
Yeah, I can see that. I can see that.
Okay. All right. So now, if I go over to my browser here, and I go over to localhost, I just created a website just now from scratch.
Okay, this is interesting.
Okay, and it's got like a little contact form here, see? And it's got the ability to edit, right? You can edit your pages here.
Save the data as well.
You see that? And so now I can go and there's like a little editor and I can edit my my web pages. But of course I have to configure a user and a password.
Got it. The data, you have a database behind, you have
No database.
Okay.
And that's the difference. You see, what I was running into was, like with WordPress, for example, it's very reliant upon the database, and the same thing with Joomla and Drupal. So if your database gets hacked, then your website is compromised. This is all HTML, but what it does is it takes HTML snippets. You see? So it's just a bunch of HTML snippets. So if I go back to my home page here, okay, and let me go over to my code editor, in case you can see what this looks like. And you can see there's right here. So that's the site I just created right here. And if I go over to my templates now, see, they're all HTML templates. So here's my overall layout right here. You see? So here's where you can put in all of your style sheets and all of that stuff. And then what this little PHP application does is it just simply takes the HTML snippet and plugs it into where it says contents. So,
like 10 minutes?
Yeah. So now I've got all these little snippets right here. So for example, under site, here's my home page right here. You see, I can even have PHP code if I want to mixed in. And then here's all my HTML. And then this itself is also able to consume HTML snippets off of the services directory, and whatever directory you create, it will look for HTML snippets and just suck them right in and stick them wherever you put the tag. Here. So it's all file-based. There's no database at all.
Nice. So there are individual files in a specific format, and these just parse and then get and then display the overall.
Yeah. Exactly. So no database, all HTML basically. So when you want to update your website, you can actually just upload HTML snippets and they'll automatically appear. Or you can go into the online, I've got an online editor based on CK editor, using the CK editor. So you actually go in and edit and make changes online if you want. Or if you just want to upload your HTML, you can do it that way as well. And the reason why I did this was because at one point I had to build 5 websites in 2 weeks. So I took 5 different templates and I took the contents out of the template, and then that became my layout. And then I just created HTML snippets. And then I used this tool that I created to launch the websites. So my own website's running this unlikelysource.com. That's my own website. It's running the tool, same tool.
Got it.
So these are all HTML snippets right here, these 3. And when I go to one of these, for example, then this is another HTML snippet that gets sucked into the overall layout.
And this is open, you said this is open source? No.
Yeah. So if you go over into GitHub, and it's actually the best place to start is here under packages. And my organization is called Unlikely Source. Unlikely Source. And so it's called File CMS Core. But to install it, what you actually do is you install the website repository. And then once the website repository is installed, then you follow these instructions and you're done.
Magic or reality?
Yeah, so that's it. So let me go back to stop sharing. And that was my latest project. And again, I like open source because I like to kind of give back to the community. I've been using open source for a long time and wanted to give something back. So it helped me, right? It helps me with my projects for my customers. And it also hopefully will help somebody else, although I doubt anyone's heard about this. Probably something new will come down the road next year anyway. So.
Yeah, I mean, I hope when this goes on YouTube, for example, and if there are people interested, they might want to contact you, any questions or contribute to the, the repository itself.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. Yeah, you can put a link, I guess. I can send it to you.
Sure, thank you. So 2 years COVID phase, work from home. Have you all the time worked from home or?
Well, like I said, I've been a contractor really since I graduated, pretty much. Although I have worked for companies off and on, as a proper
employee.
Employee. Like I worked for this one company. It was a networking company for about 10 years. Did training for them, and they sent me all over the world. Doing trainings, network trainings, which was actually it's good for my current understanding because they were into all kinds of different technologies, Java-based Apache Tomcat struts, XSL, XSLT, all that kind of stuff. And then they were into a directory structure, which was similar to Active Directory and actually preceded Active Directory.
Got it. So if we put everything that you know on, represent it visually, how beautiful that would be. Maybe someday we should try that. What do you think?
I would see a big circle because now I'm in Thailand. A big circle.
So now you enjoyed your life in terms of you started did what you want to and you're still continuing to do what you want to. Which is a dream for many. Wonderful.
Yeah. Oh, and I've lived in New York. I lived in France. I've lived in California. And then I lived in Netherlands, and then in UK for about 8 years, UK, and then Sweden, and now in Thailand. I've been in Thailand for about 8 years as well.
Very nice. Have you any plans to visit India anytime? You should.
That would be very interesting. It depends on if somebody sends me an invitation or not.
Very nice. Good. Hope we
I
get
probably come with my wife because she likes to travel around as well.
Good. Other hobbies other than you said computer and music, do they stay the same, and did they stay the same right from 80s till now, or have you picked up something in between?
Pretty much, yeah. I like to read. I enjoy movies. Writing, of course. I do writing. I've done some fiction writing, but technical writing is probably more mine. Yeah.
So you mentioned about your graduation and then the hardcore university schools, all of that, colleges.
Yeah.
And is there any resource in terms of book or video or any of that sort where you keep going and referring them?
But I'm sorry, I lost you on that.
So is there something that is from the old time or from the 70s, 60s, 80s, you continue to refer it even today? Is there anything like that? Like a book or a video or some code?
Yeah, for sure. Every once in a while I'll go back and view some of the movies, that like Groundhog Day. I don't know if you remember that one.
My question was more on the tech side. like because you have gone through like right from basic to now JavaScript, Python. So I was like looking forward at like anything on that.
The older technologies, you mean?
Yeah. Any reference like, hey Ajay, whatever changes I've seen, irrespective of that, this is one thing, this is one book that I constantly refer to, or I say this is the Bible for me.
Okay. I see what you're saying. Not really any particular book or work. I would say, because I mean, obviously, there's things like software design patterns. Those are classic, but I never read the book.
You actually implemented and then learned on the job.
Yeah, exactly. So a lot of the stuff, once I left the university, actually my formal training pretty much ended. And from that point on, I was just doing it, just like Pascal. Nobody taught me Pascal. I just did Python. Nobody taught me Python. I just wrote Python code for a year, because it's all the same. It's all the same once you learn the basic, especially from assembler. I mean, that's it all gets down to that. And there's certain things that all programs do.
Very.
But when I tackled a program in, it was called Prolog.
Okay.
That was different. Because that it's an AI language specifically for AI and for writing neural networks and stuff like that.
Which
really
year
different.
Are we talking about here? Which year?
That was I wrote an application in Prolog in, would have been probably about 89.
And you're saying it was about AI?
It was an AI language specifically for AI, for developing neural networks.
And people are now talking as if AI has come now, or maybe it has the data so much.
Yeah, no, AI has been around for a long time.
Right.
So yes, I actually wrote an application in Prolog, and that was truly, truly different. It was not like any other programming language that I've used. Yeah, and the other thing I would say, kind of a new trend would be asynchronous programming. That is also different, because I was brought up on the synchronous programming model. So with asynchronous programming, you have to think completely differently. You can't write the application the same way. The same would be true of like React, if you're writing a front end in React. In PHP, there's React to PHP. So there's also a back end async as well, but you do have to think very differently from the traditional. Yeah.
So what's the latest thing that you are in progress learning? What are you learning right now?
Thai language. But that's kind of a necessity.
Yeah. 8 years. Got it.
Yeah.
I will not take more time from your Friday. I already saw the jar jug. Enjoy your Friday. I'm going to stop recording now, and
Okay.
I'll post the GitHub link and in the description of the video, and then just some notes in what people can expect, but not go in detail. Let them dig through the video, right?
Okay.